Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a book all about leadership.
Awesome.
It's called
I'm excited for this one.
Turn the Ship Around by L. David Marquet.
Yeah.
And
It's a classic.
it is.
Yes,
It
yeah.
is. It's one of those books that
Everybody should read it.
I think a lot of people have heard of too, but I don't know how many people have actually read it.
Yeah.
So it's about, just to give a real high level overview.
Sure.
It's about Marquet's experience as the captain of a nuclear submarine,
Yeah.
the USS Santa Fe, and,
Wow.
and how he transformed the culture
Mhm.
on board that submarine to go from like the worst performing submarine in the fleet to the best.
Yeah. Which is amazing. I mean, when you think about the context, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about a nuclear submarine.
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate high pressure, high stakes environment.
Yeah.
So to see a leader come in and completely turn things around like that,
Yeah.
it's really remarkable.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And one of the things that I think is so cool about the book is that he doesn't just tell you what he did.
Right.
He actually explains like the why behind it,
The thinking.
The thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can really understand
The principles.
yeah, like the principles behind his approach
Mm.
and how those principles can be applied in all sorts of different situations.
Exactly, because I think sometimes people read these leadership books and they think, well, that's great for a submarine captain, but what does that have to do with me?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Marquet does a great job of extracting those universal truths about leadership that are relevant, regardless of your industry or your position.
Yeah, and it's not just military, right?
No, absolutely not.
Like
It's for anyone.
yes.
Anyone who wants to be a better leader.
So I think one of the things that really struck me early on in the book was his experience on the USS Sunfish. This
Right.
was actually his first command.
His first command, yeah.
And it was pretty traditional, a pretty traditional hierarchical environment,
Mhm.
very much like orders come down from the top
Yeah,
and everyone else just kind of follows along,
right. The classic command and control structure.
Exactly.
Mm.
But then things get interesting when he moves to the USS Will Rogers,
Oh, Will Rogers, yeah.
where he faces some pretty significant challenges
As an engineer.
as the engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was those challenges on the Will Rogers that really started to shape his views on leadership.
Right, because the Will Rogers had its share of mishaps and mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of clicks for him. He realized that relying solely on the captain's competence wasn't really a sustainable model.
Yeah, and I can see how that would be a problem because if you have a new captain
Yeah.
come in and take over,
Yeah.
a perfectly good ship could go downhill really fast.
Absolutely. You're totally at the mercy of whoever's at the helm.
Yeah.
And even the bat captains can make mistakes, right? But if the crew is just blindly following orders,
Mhm.
it can be disastrous.
Right.
So this experience with the Will Rogers really sparked a question in Marquet's mind.
Oh, yeah.
What if, he wondered, competence and decision-making were spread throughout the entire organization
Interesting.
instead of just concentrated at the top?
Okay, so that's like the seed of his whole leader philosophy.
Exactly.
Right.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here
Okay.
because now he gets handed the USS Santa Fe.
Right.
And this is where things really get interesting.
Yeah, because this was not a plum assignment, right?
Okay.
This was like the Santa Fe at the time.
They were the worst.
The worst.
The absolute bottom of the barrel, low morale, terrible performance, worst retention rates in the entire force.
Like they were the poster child for how not to run a submarine.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there was even this picture of the Santa Fe's inattentive crew, like circulating online as
Yeah.
a negative example. And it's important to remember, he inherited this situation. He didn't create this mess. He had like 6 months.
6 months to turn it around.
6 months to turn it around before a major deployment. Talk about pressure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The stakes were incredibly high.
So where does he even begin?
Well, he starts with a seemingly small change, but this change creates a ripple effect throughout the entire submarine.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He calls it the Chiefs in Charge initiative.
Chiefs in charge. All right, break that down for us. What does that even mean?
So picture this. You're an enlisted sailor, and you need something as simple as leave approval.
Okay.
In the traditional system, you need like a stack of signatures. It goes to the chief, then the division officer, then the department head, the XO.
Up the chain of command.
Up the chain of command, you get the picture.
Yeah, it's a bureaucratic nightmare.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did he change that?
He makes one radical shift. One word. Control.
Control.
The chief becomes the final word on enlisted leave.
Really?
That's it.
Just one word.
One word.
What kind of impact did that have?
It's huge.
Hmm.
Because now these chiefs, they have to actually own their roles.
Yeah.
They're directly responsible for scheduling, qualifications, the performance of their sailors. It's a tiny change,
Mm-hmm.
but it shifts the whole power dynamic.
It makes you think, right? Like, even in our own work lives, we might be overlooking the power of these small, seemingly insignificant tweaks.
Okay.
Could handing over control in a strategic way actually boost accountability for everyone?
It's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning. Marquet didn't stop there.
Yeah.
He knew morale was a big problem on the Santa Fe.
Okay.
So he tried something called the three-name rule.
Three-name rule. Okay, fill us in.
Basically, the idea was to foster respect, even if it felt forced at first.
Okay.
Anytime you address a shipmate, you use their rate, their last name, and their first name.
I can see how that might rub some people the wrong way. Like, shouldn't respect just come naturally from good leadership? Why force it with a rule?
That was the initial resistance.
Yeah.
But Marquet had this counterintuitive idea. Act the way you want to feel, and the feeling might follow.
Interesting. So instead of waiting for a change in attitude, you change the behavior first.
Exactly.
I wonder if there are things in our own lives where we could act our way into a better outcome.
It's a thought-provoking experiment.
Yeah.
And this is just scratching the surface.
Mhm.
Marquet keeps pushing boundaries.
Hmm.
Another change he implements is this shift from briefing to certifying.
Okay, let's unpack that. I have a feeling a lot of us have sat through some pretty useless briefings in our time.
Oh, yeah. Countless PowerPoint presentations that went in one ear and out the other.
Right.
He uses the example of the submarine submerging procedure.
Okay.
The standard briefing was long, tedious, and often went in one ear and out the other.
Because everyone's just sitting there passively. They're not internalizing the information or thinking critically about it.
Exactly. So Marquet flips the script. Instead of just briefing the procedure, each crew member has to demonstrate their knowledge. They have to be certified.
So you're moving from just information dumps to like actually proving what you know.
Yes.
It's like transforming those useless meetings we've all suffered through, right?
Yeah.
Instead of passively receiving information, everyone's actively participating.
Mm.
Every decision point is solid.
And it ties in beautifully with another principle Marquet emphasizes.
Oh, yeah.
We learn.
Okay, tell us more about We Learn. What does that look like in action?
Well, it's about creating a culture of continuous learning. Viewing every task, every interaction as an opportunity for growth.
I love that.
Instead of formal top-down training, it becomes this shared, ongoing process. And it makes you think, how much time do we actually dedicate to learning and growing each week?
Are we pushing ourselves to be better?
Exactly.
That's what sets high-performing people and teams apart, right?
Totally.
They're not content with the status quo. They're always striving to improve.
Speaking of improvement, let's talk about the USS Santa Fe's guiding principles.
Okay, let's hear them.
They are initiative, competence, and clarity.
Initiative, competence, clarity.
And these weren't just like motivational posters on the wall.
Right.
Captain Marquet, he baked them into everything.
Wow.
Daily operations, awards, evaluations, they were the heart of the ship.
That's such a good point because I think we've all seen organizations where the values are just lip service.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They don't actually guide decision,
Right.
or they're not really lived out.
Yeah, they're just empty words.
So how do you make sure those principles actually matter? How do you make them real?
Well, Captain Marquet doesn't just tell us.
Yeah.
He shows us.
Through stories.
Through stories.
And I bet he's got some pretty intense stories, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To illustrate how these principles actually played out in real life.
One that comes to mind takes place in the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
The Santa Fe needs to surface quickly to avoid a potential collision, and it's a junior officer, Ensign Viles, who comes up with the solution.
Hang on, a junior officer. Wasn't he supposed to just follow orders?
Exactly, and this is where we see those guiding principles, and that we learn mentality in action.
Okay.
It's about more than just empowerment.
It's about emancipation.
It's about emancipation.
Okay, I think we've got to dive deeper into this idea of emancipation.
Yeah.
What does that really mean, and how is it different from empowerment?
So before we went and got all philosophical about emancipation versus empowerment,
Right.
I think it's important to kind of like break that down a little bit.
Yeah, because it does feel like there's a subtle but important difference there.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Empowerment is still kind of top-down.
Okay.
It's like saying, okay, I, the leader, am giving you some power to make decisions.
It's still permission-based, right?
Exactly.
Someone's still holding the keys.
Right.
But emancipation, that's different.
Emancipation is about recognizing the inherent capacity the potential in every single person.
Regardless of their rank or position.
Exactly. It's saying you already have the power, now go use it.
And Ensign Avals, coming up with that solution in the Strait of Hormuz, that was a perfect example of that.
Textbook example.
He didn't wait for permission, he just acted.
And this is the kind of thinking Marquet wants to cultivate throughout the entire ship.
Okay.
And he provides a whole set of tools, almost like counterintuitive mechanisms, to help make this happen.
I love counterintuitive. Give us some example.
Well, one that really stands out is don't brief, certify.
Okay, we touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
But it's worth digging into. Because in a traditional command control structure, briefings are just how things are done.
That's how you pass along information.
Right.
You brief the troops.
But Marquet is saying
Marquet argues
that briefings can often lead to passive listening.
Yeah.
People aren't really engaged.
Right. They're not thinking critically. They're not really internalizing the information.
So instead of just telling people what to do, you make them prove they understand it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It shifts the responsibility, creates accountability.
Yeah.
And it ties in with another one of Marquet's mechanisms.
Okay.
Specify goals, not methods.
Oh, specify goals, not methods. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work in a submarine environment?
Well, imagine you're doing a fire drill.
Okay.
In a traditional setting, there's a rigid step-by-step procedure.
Everyone knows exactly what to do.
Right, exactly.
But Marquet throws that out the window.
She does. He gives them the goal.
Okay.
Put out the fire as quickly and efficiently as possible.
And guess what happens?
They figure it out.
I bet they do.
Right, because they're not constrained by a predetermined method.
Yeah.
They can be creative, they collaborate, and their response times improve dramatically.
So it's like you're saying, I trust you to achieve this outcome. Now go figure out the best way to do it.
Exactly. It's all about that trust.
And this leads to another seemingly counterintuitive mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
Eliminate top-down monitoring systems.
Ooh, that's a scary one for some people.
Great, especially on a nuclear submarine. How could you possibly function without constant monitoring?
Now, you would think it'd be chaos, right?
Yeah.
But Marquet found that all that monitoring, it was actually creating unnecessary bureaucracy.
Okay.
It was reinforcing that leader-follower dynamic.
He talks about this thing called the tickler.
The tickler.
Right.
Yes, yes. It was this massive list of tasks and deadlines, and it was constantly being reviewed and micromanaged by the officers.
I hate the tickler.
Right. So what happens when they get rid of it?
What happens?
The department heads step up.
Okay.
They take more ownership of their work because they can't rely on that tickler as a crutch.
They have to think for themselves.
They got to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And they make sure things get done.
It's amazing how less oversight can lead to better results.
It is.
It's like when you trust people to do their jobs, they often rise to the occasion.
They do.
And speaking of powerful lessons, one of the simplest mechanisms Marquet talks about is think out loud.
Think out loud. I love that one.
Okay, break that one down for me.
It seems almost too basic.
Yeah.
But Marquet encourages his officers to verbalize their thought processes.
Okay.
He wants to hear what's going on in their heads.
So it's not just about giving orders. It's about understanding the reasoning behind the decision.
Exactly.
Okay.
It creates transparency, builds trust, and it allows Marquet to step back and let his officers take the lead.
There's that emancipation again.
There it is.
Okay, hit me with another counterintuitive one.
All right, how about embrace the inspectors?
Whoa.
Right.
In most organizations, inspectors are the enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's scrambling to make sure everything's perfect, hiding any potential problems.
Yeah.
But Marquet turns that on its head.
He does.
He sees inspectors as a valuable source of knowledge and feedback.
Exactly.
So instead of dreading the inspection, you welcome it as a learning opportunity.
Yes.
That takes a lot of courage, honestly, to be that open to scrutiny and feedback.
It does. It does.
But the results speak for themselves.
They do. The Santa Fe went from worst to first, remember? And this brings us to another crucial aspect of the leader model.
Okay.
Clarity. Marquet talks a lot about the importance of organizational clarity.
Okay. What does that mean exactly?
It means everyone being on the same page, having a shared understanding of the organization's goals, the values, and one of the ways that Marquet achieves this is by tapping into something he calls legacy.
Legacy. Okay, like the history of the submarine force.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He talks about how the submarine force has this rich history, of courage and sacrifice, but often it's forgotten or taken for granted.
Right. So how do you bring that legacy to life?
Well, Marquet uses a variety of methods.
Right.
He posts historical information around the ship.
Mm-hmm.
He reads citations for bravery. He even makes announcements over the loudspeaker when they pass the locations where other submarines were lost in World War II.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's like you're connecting the present moment to this larger story,
Yes.
reminding everyone why their work matters.
Yes, exactly. And he doesn't just focus on the past.
Okay.
He also emphasizes the importance of having guiding principles that actually inform decisions, which brings us back to
The Santa Fe's guiding principles.
Santa Fe's guiding principles.
Yeah.
Initiative, competence, and clarity.
Woven into the fabric of the ship.
Yes.
Not just empty words.
Absolutely. And Marquet gives examples of how they were used in performance evaluations, awards, even everyday interactions. They provided a framework for recognizing and rewarding excellence.
So it's not just about setting those principles at the top.
Right.
It's about making sure they trickle down to every level of the organization.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key point, recognition. Marquet talks about the importance of using immediate recognition to reinforce those desired behaviors.
Okay, I can see how that ties into the guiding principles, right?
Yes.
You see someone demonstrating initiative, you call it out, you reward it.
Exactly. He even changes the way awards are given, moving away from subjective evaluations to more objective, data-driven assessments.
So less about gut feelings and more about measurable results.
Precisely. For example, he introduces a scoring system for damage control drills, rewarding teams for meeting specific performance goals.
That makes a lot of sense. You're setting a clear standard. You're eliminating any ambiguity.
Right.
It's fair, and it's motivating.
It is. And all of these mechanisms, they're working together to create this new kind of culture on the Santa Fe.
And what's the outcome of all this? What are the tangible results of Marquet's leadership approach?
The results are pretty impressive.
Okay.
Morale skyrockets.
Mm-hmm.
Retention rates go through the roof.
Wow.
The Santa Fe goes from being the worst performing submarine in the fleet to winning multiple awards for excellence.
So it really is a testament to the power of trusting people, giving them the tools and the freedom to succeed.
It is.
But I'm curious, how do you make this last? I mean, Captain Marquet is not going to be on the Santa Fe forever, right?
Right. That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to one of the most crucial aspects of Marquet's legacy.
Okay.
He doesn't just turn the Santa Fe around.
Right.
He creates a ripple effect that goes far beyond the confines of that submarine.
So what happens next? What's the next chapter in this story?
So you ask what happens next. What's the next chapter in this story?
Yeah. Does this leader model just kind of fade away when Captain Marquet leaves?
That's what's so fascinating about this. Marquet doesn't just turn the ship around and then sail off into the sunset, you know?
Right.
He plants these seeds that continue to grow long after he's gone.
Okay, give us some examples. What happens to that Santa Fe crew after he leaves?
A lot of them go on to do incredible things, both in and outside the Navy. Some rise through the ranks and become leaders on other ships, taking Marquet's principles with them.
So it's not just about individual success, it's about spreading this model.
Exactly. Others leave the Navy, and they apply those principles in different fields.
Okay.
They start businesses, pursue higher education, they become leaders in their communities. It's like Marquet unlocked something in them.
Yeah, like a potential they didn't even know they had.
Exactly.
That's really cool. And what about Marquet himself? Does he just retire to a quiet life of, I don't know, woodworking and fishing?
No, not at all. He leaves active duty
Okay.
and dedicates himself to sharing these ideas with the world.
That's awesome.
He writes, "Turn the Ship Around," which becomes a bestseller.
Yeah, it's a must-read.
A must-read for leaders.
Yeah.
And it resonates, I think, because it's not just theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's rooted in his real-world experience on the Santa Fe.
Right.
People see those results, and they want to know how he did it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Turn the Ship Around, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? Like, how can we start putting these ideas into practice in our own lives?
I think it starts with a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
We have to let go of that traditional idea of leadership, where the leader holds all the power
Right.
and everyone else just follows orders. We got to flip that pyramid
On its head.
on its head.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Create a culture of trust
Yeah.
where you're distributing leadership throughout the organization.
Right.
Give people the freedom to think for themselves, make decisions, take ownership.
And it's not just about saying, okay, everyone's a leader now.
Right.
It's about using those tools that Marquet talks about, those mechanisms
Right.
to actually make that happen.
Exactly. Things like don't brief, certify, think out loud, embrace the inspectors. These might sound counterintuitive,
Right. Mhm.
but they can be incredibly powerful.
And I think it's important to remember, too, that every organization, every team is different.
Oh, yeah, of
There's
course.
no one-size-fits-all approach here. But those core principles of giving people control, building competence and clarity, those are universal.
Absolutely. And it's a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination. It takes time, effort, a willingness to experiment and to learn.
To learn as you go.
Yes, but the rewards for both the leader and the team are worth it.
So to our listeners, here's something to think about. Captain Marquet's story shows us that leadership isn't about your title or your position. It's about the impact you have,
Hmm.
the ripple effect you create. It's about empowering others to become leaders in their own right. And in a world facing so many complex challenges, we need more than just followers.
We need leaders at every level.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's it for our deep dive into Turn the Ship Around. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading.